Okay, we're live. We're just going to wait for a minute or two to allow everyone to join. And I'll say this now, but okay, we're live. As you go along, you're welcome to post comments with any questions you've got for us, and we'll stop halfway through and at the end to address those. Okay, one more minute and then we will get started. Okay, great. So I think it's about time we get started. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Tom, one of the authors of Learn Better at Home, the student guide to effective self-study. We're a team of students based at Oxford University. We've written this ebook to try and address some of the inequalities in education caused by the pandemic, but we really think that this information gives a unique student perspective, which is useful anytime, really, to anyone.
Hi, I'm Peter. I've also been writing this book, along with Tom, but also two others, Tejas and Scarlett, who unfortunately can't be here today because of health problems, but we'll be going through some key parts of this book and giving you some tips and tools that are hopefully useful and will help you out. And we're really looking forward to any questions that you send through. So here's a quick outline of what we're going to go through. Give a quick intro, then we're going to talk about 3 areas: dealing with motivation, tips for getting started, and effective study, because our book aims to be comprehensive, which means that we have 3 sections, and one is about motivation and actually getting to a point where you want to go and sit down and study. One is about getting started, sitting down and studying. And the final section is about studying effectively. Given that you're at your desk, what are you going to do to study effectively? Because there are ways to study really effectively and ways to just sit at your desk wasting time. Unfortunately, there are far more at the second than the first, but we're going to try to help guide you through that. And in between those sections, as Tom said, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. So, what is Learn Better at Home? It's a donate what you can ebook, and we're raising money for the Life You Can Save's COVID-19 fund. Donate what you can means you can go onto our website, learnbetterathome.com, and get it for free or for any amount that you want to donate. And the Life You Can Save's COVID-19 fund is an independent charity evaluator's picks at what seem the most promising charities addressing the pandemic. And we as students at Oxford with different experiences of self-study, not just at uni, but at school as well, studying a wide range of subjects for different reasons. So sometimes to do well in exams, sometimes because we wanted to explore. And so this book isn't written just to help you pass exams. It's written to help you achieve your study goals, whatever they are. What's inside? Well, we've already talked about these 3 sections: motivation, mindset, and goals, getting down to work, and effective study. There are also some tools to help improve your understanding of all of this and put it into practice. Those tools are quick tasks, which we'll actually see a couple of today, and subject-specific examples. So we use English, Lit, Maths, and Chemistry as examples here, along with end-of-chapter summaries for easy review. So firstly, I'm going to talk a bit about dealing with motivation, because I think this is quite a big one. the first thing here is to recognize what motivates you. This might seem like a bit of a strange question to ask, but I think it's very important, and we'll see why in a sec. Why do you want to study? What are you actually trying to achieve or learn? And what is it that's literally getting you moving? I mean, that's where the word motivates comes from. So why might it be useful to know what motivates you? Because if you know what motivates you, that can help you stay motivated, and it can also help to tailor your study towards that. For example, if you're motivated primarily towards getting a high grade in an exam, that's fine. Maybe focus quite a bit of energy on how to play the exam game, the game of how the exam works. But if you're learning, say, some maths because it just looks interesting, or you want to understand better some topic, so you go read about it, you're probably not going to spend any time thinking about exams because you're not taking any. But there are more subtle things you can do, and you can sort of optimize your study based on what your motivation is. Next up, let me move this thing, learning to deal with negative emotions effectively. This might seem strange to put here, but I think it's very common for people to feel negative emotions when we're studying, like we all have. And it's easy to let those thoughts end up sort of defining you. So feeling like you're stupid or feeling like you're a failure. But please try not to do this. I think, it's easy for me to say that. What's an actual tip for not doing this? I think it can help sometimes to think of emotions as things that you have rather than things that define you. So, for example, take the emotion fear. In English, we'd usually say, I'm scared. I am scared. We recognize that it's temporary, so it probably doesn't define us. But in other cases, we're sort of defining ourselves. How about, say, Spanish? Well, here we would say, tengo miedo, which literally means I have fear. Fear is just something you happen to be feeling right now. When you recognize that, you can accept your emotions without letting them define you. Ooh. Now, moving back directly to motivation, it's important to realize that motivation fluctuates, it changes over time, and that is very normal. So don't worry that sometimes you don't feel motivated. What you can do is to think about doing certain things when you're feeling motivated. So as an example of this, goal planning. It can be really useful to think about what your goals are, just like with motivation, and to actually plan them, maybe write down what they are so that you have a really clear idea and you can look back on it. But this is not a very useful thing to do when you're not feeling very motivated, as I know firsthand, because my school, which was my secondary school, which was very well intentioned, thought, let's make people write down their personal goals like 3 times a year. The problem was I was very rarely motivated at that moment to do it, and I can't remember any of them now. So yeah, just there's a real value in doing things that when you're feeling motivated. So how do you respond to the fact that motivation fluctuates, apart from just like choosing to do stuff when you feel motivated? There are 2 things that we talk about in the book that you can use. One is something called core motivation strengthening. The idea here is boosting your overall motivation. And there are various ways to do that, which we'll explore. Another is something we call behavior hacks. This is basically about increasing your motivation at a particular time without actually changing your overall motivation. And that is in the book. We might go into it right now. So let's talk about core motivation strengthening. We've developed a 3-stage process, which we think can be useful for this. The first stage is very similar to point 1 on this slide. It's to understand it, to get it really clear why you're motivated. So also it can help to think about the fundamental reasons why you're motivated, as opposed to the most immediate ones. So it might be, I want to do well in this particular test so that I can do well in this particular big national exam, so that I can get into a good university to study whatever subject. That is much more powerful of a motivator than when you're feeling like you're not that motivated, than to have something like, I just want to do well in this particular topic test. Because in reality, the topic test isn't super important on its own. The reason it matters is for something else. Then the next stage is to feel it, to let it sink in. And people often talk about visualizing goals. I think you can do the same with motivation. If you really think about what's motivating you and get thinking about it, feeling it, as well as thinking about it, so on an emotional level, that can really help. And finally, to remember it, try to find a way to keep it in your mind. Here, there's no one size fits all, but I'm going to tell a quick story of a friend who I'll name Joe for now, who struggled at one point. They got their A-level results, the big British exams that you take at the age of 18 and basically determine where you go to university if you decide to do that, and had done really badly by his standards, much worse than he thought, than it was thought he was going to do. And he had a horrible day. It was really bad. But what he did in that evening was to write a letter to himself, explaining how he felt and what he would do to change this. So he retook his A-levels a year later. And obviously, even though he was quite motivated, he still felt at times where he just wasn't that motivated to work. And then he'd get out that letter and look at it and think about how he felt and what he wanted to change. And now he's studying natural sciences at a top university. I think that made a big difference. Here is a quick task, an example of something you can do to practice this. We're not going to force you to do anything, but we recommend taking a minute to try this. So pick something that motivates you and then try to go through this 3-step process. You won't get the whole way in a minute, but you'll get initial ideas and you can come after this and think about it more. So we'll just wait a minute and yeah.
Okay, so hopefully that's enough time for you to get started with establishing what motivates you. I'd advise that you take a bit more time after this call, when you do have a bit of free time, to go through that full process. But for now, we're going to move on to getting started. Now, why are we going to talk about getting started? This is about getting things done, right? Well, getting started is often the hardest part of studying. Believe me, the amount of times I have sat down next to my piece of paper with my pen and sat on my phone and watched YouTube instead of writing down what I was supposed to write down or start my work, I can't count. So how can we make this whole process easier? How can we stop procrastinating? How can we overcome the worries and concerns that come with study? And how can we overcome the fact that studying is just hard to do? My advice is to start small. It's just a lot easier to study when you only want to achieve a small thing. That means starting small. If we define starting small as committing to only a small amount of study, then we see this is the case. Also, Peter, if you could move your camera so we can see one of our fetching memes. One step at a time through the icy winter there. Another question, and a good one. Why shouldn't I just do as much work as I can in the moment? Well, there's a couple of good reasons. Firstly, you may feel you've underachieved if you don't finish all of that work when it's not really the case. Or you might get burnt out, and if you're burnt out, then it just might be even harder to get started next time. So start small, because it makes work easier. How do you start small? Well, we outline a few techniques in the book. We're going to have a look at one here, the Pomodoro technique. It's very simple. It goes something like this. Sit down and focus for 25 minutes on your work. Then take a 5-minute break. After one of these cycles, repeat 4 times. After that period of 4 cycles of 25 minutes work, 5-minute break, take a longer break, maybe half an hour or an hour, or maybe you decide to finish studying. The real beauty of this technique is that all of these numbers are customizable. Maybe you need a longer break than 5 minutes, or maybe you can't focus for 25 minutes. Maybe you've only got an hour, so you decide to do 2 repeats instead of 4. Whatever you decide works for you, try it, see if it works. The fourth bullet point I've got here is to remove distractions. Now, really, this comes into chapter 8 of the book, the subsequent chapter to this one, but we'll just hint on it here. You need to create a study space which enables you to learn effectively. That means turning your phone off or putting it on silent mode, removing those notifications, as I probably should have done all those years ago while studying for my A-levels and GCSEs. That means shutting the door or isolating yourself from other people who could be a source of distraction, unfortunately. Maybe turning off the TV in the background. Or maybe you're fortunate enough to have some headphones, you can put a bit of background music on if you can't find somewhere quiet enough. Either way, just try and remove as many distractions as you can, because it's much easier to remove distractions than to avoid them. It's really hard to ignore your phone pinging constantly. Now, the last thing I'll mention is that consistency is really key. If you can just do 1 or maybe even 2 hours of work a day for a week or 2 weeks, you'll be well ahead of a lot of people. 1 hour a day for 2 weeks is 14 hours, or 10 hours if it's just weekdays. There's no way you could get all of that done in a day, realistically. Well, for me at least. Maybe you're a super worker. I don't know. Now let's move on to the quick task from chapter 7. So please try this one another time, but we say this. Choose one of the 3 methods of getting started. The Pomodoro technique, Take 20, or chunking, and give it a go. And then, as a bonus, try repeating this quick task for the other 2 methods. And think about which one was your favourite. Maybe this can help you study more effectively. Maybe one of these techniques fits your routine better than the others.
Great, and there's more on Take 20 and chunks in the book. So now I'm going to see if anyone has submitted questions. Actually, Tom, can you check that, because I don't want to move off this screen.
We don't have any questions in the chat at the moment. You're welcome to submit them if you like. If you don't have any now, that's fine. We'll answer some more at the end.
Okay, let's just wait like 20 seconds, see if any come through.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on then to the next bit. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks. Again, any questions, stick them in the comments and we'll do our best to get back to you at the end. Next, we're going to talk about effective study. So as Peter hinted at the start, we're assuming now you've got your motivation sorted and you've got past that barrier of getting started. You're writing things down. How do you do what you're doing effectively? Well, as our nice dog there shows, we've got a 5-step process to doing so. Starts with getting an overview, then finding useful resources, understanding the material, practicing the material, and then reviewing and revising the material. Now, you may find there's a bit of an overlap, and there certainly is, especially between understanding, practicing, and revising. But we'll go into a little bit more detail when we get to that. Firstly, though, you need to get an overview. A lot of you will be studying for exams, and that's fine. But you need to be familiar with 2 key things in this case. The format of your exam, how many questions you're supposed to answer, in how long a time, and secondly, your syllabus. So for me, when I was doing A-level chemistry here, I would just Google A-level chemistry AQA syllabus. I'd click on the link and I'd see the download, and it might say something like know the mechanism of turning X into Y. Great, now I know what I need to know. So now you know what you need to know, you need to find the ways to learn that information. You need to find useful resources. And the internet is really your friend here. Maybe you have textbooks like this one here. Maybe you have notes from school, but the internet is a provider here. There are so many great websites for individual subjects which go above and beyond what anyone would expect an individual to come up with. For chemistry, I remember some great ones. I think alevelchemistry.co.uk. It had questions on every topic, plus exam questions, plus extensions, plus summaries. There's so much out there if you just go to your favorite search engine. And if it's safe to do so, I'd also advise libraries if you want something a bit more specific, maybe. What if you don't have good internet? Again, your textbook is your friend. Maybe you could go to an area where there's public Wi-Fi and download the aforementioned syllabus or any resources from these free online resources. Now, to understand that material, you've got your textbook, you've got your favorite websites, your 2 or 3 key websites to reference, and you need to understand that mechanism I mentioned earlier. It's more than just remembering that mechanism, it's more than just remembering the facts. What we suggest is to be able to explain the concept you're trying to learn to a friend. And if you don't have one, maybe an imaginary friend. A mirror works quite well in this circumstance, I can tell you from experience. If you find yourself stumbling, that could just mean that you need a little bit more work to reinforce your understanding before moving on to practicing. Okay, so why practice if you already understand the material? Well, 2 key reasons. If you take an exam, it can just help you be quicker. And there's often time pressure during exams, so this can really help. And secondly, it reinforces your understanding. It helps you memorize what you've understood. And maybe 6 months down the line, you'll be able to refer to it more easily. Here's some examples of practicing for the subjects we mention in our book. So for maths, you're going to want to start with simple drills, just going through the motion and understanding the basic aspects. Once you're happy with that, you should move on to more advanced problem-solving questions. For chemistry, we have 3 different types of memory techniques and practicing to reinforce. Recalling simple information, maybe the colour of a chemical reaction. Trying questions from a textbook and failing that, your websites, your exam questions. And lastly, practicing explaining the more complex processes. Maybe this is aloud, maybe it's a flowchart, or whatever form it is. It's really useful to do that. For me, in chemistry, that was a big A3 piece of paper, which you can see in the book, which explains all of the different mechanisms and chemical reactions I needed to know. And lastly, English. To remember information and practice information in English, we recommend 3 different techniques: forming mind maps of the information, practicing with flashcards, or summarizing information repeatedly. Again, this could be aloud or this could be writing down. But summarizing we find a really useful technique, not just in English, but across the spectrum of subjects. So you've done a bit of understanding and you're well practiced. Now comes the exam, or now comes the deadline to reinforce what you've got to learn. It's time to review and revise your information. How are we going to do that? Memory techniques. Okay, and when are we going to do the memory techniques, and what kind of memory techniques are we going to use? That comes down to A and B, active recall and spaced repetition. So what are they? Active recall is the difference between just reading the answer on the back of a flashcard and really thinking about it, repeating it aloud, or maybe writing it back out. So active recall might be answering that question to a friend and then checking if you've done it right. The opposite would be, I'll use my textbook again. Oh yeah, I probably knew that, it's okay. Move on. Don't do it. Spaced repetition then is reviewing information now, in an hour's time, in a day's time, in a week's time. It's spacing out when you see and actively recall what you have to remember in order to reinforce it in your mind. Let's just go into a couple of memory techniques here. And it could be anything. Mnemonics are a personal favourite. Richard of York gave battle in vain as the colours of the rainbow, which I could never remember before that. Repeatedly writing down what you need to know, or just practicing more exam questions, which I'm sure you're aware of if you've taken any exams, is a great way to review and revise information. We'll finish up this section with the quick task from chapter 8, which is to explain the 5 stages of effective study to someone who hasn't read this book. Now, of course, you can't do it now, but please try it with someone at home after this session. And failing that, try it with your imaginary friend in the mirror. If you have any more questions, we're happy to take them. Just post them in the comments.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. And yeah, we'd love to hear what questions you have and what sort of things you're thinking about, because we want to do whatever's the most helpful with this time. And you can also email us any other questions that you come up with later at hello@learnbetterathome.com. Just to emphasize a couple of things about the book. Firstly, we wanted it to be available to absolutely everyone. So you can go ahead and go to learnbetterathome.com and get it right now. And you can get it for free if you can't afford to make a donation right now. Secondly, it's pretty comprehensive and it's quite long, but you can hop around from chapter to chapter. And at the end of every chapter, there are three links to other chapters we think can work well. That means there are loads and loads of ways of reading the book, because like going in a straight line is very boring. Have any questions come through?
We don't have any yet, no.
Okay.
We'll check emails as well. If you'd like any personal questions answering, happy to do that.
Cool. If not, we'll just wait a couple of minutes and do a quick session, because quick sessions, like in Pomodoro technique, can be very useful. Well, we hope this one was anyway.
I should add, Peter, this book is not just for students. If you have a parent or teacher who you maybe think this would be useful for, please do share it with them. We've had a few teachers get the book so far, and it would be great if we could distribute this to as many people as possible. So even if we can't raise money through the donations for charity, then we can at least help people learn more effectively at home.
Yeah, definitely. And my mum, who's like, what, 57? 57, read the book and said that there were things that she'd learned from it and things that would help her. So although we're focusing on school students because we think there isn't much out there for them in terms of a really long form guide, it isn't just like a post or whatever, and it's about self-study in general rather than say just for exams, it would be applicable to anyone who wants to learn better at home. And I guess, yeah, if we don't have any questions, Vanilla away, share away, please. And thank you so much for coming. We hope you found something in this useful.
Thank you very much.